Well, good morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business, politics, and space. Our last conversation was with the CEO of DoSomething.org about youth engagement in politics, voter registration, and the 2024 election. And today, we jump into NASA's work around getting back to the moon and onward to Mars. No one better to have this conversation with than Joseph Pelfrey, the director of NASA's Marshall Flight Center. Pleasure to see you, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. That's a pretty cool jacket you got there.
I'm all in. I got to tell you. I mean, I'm getting mocked by family and friends, but I am a believer in the work you're doing, sir.
That's amazing. We appreciate that support.
Well, look, I'm on the heels of coming back from space camp. I have an actual certificate here, Joseph, and I was blown away by just the enthusiasm of young people, of parents. It was family camp. I brought my two boys, and it was really kind of this moment where I was like, people are still excited about NASA and about space. I mean, so I figured maybe we start off with kind of how you think about your role, NASA's role, and kind of getting a younger generation involved, excited, STEM, and kind of how you're thinking about NASA's role for the future and getting people engaged.
Yeah, thanks. It's part of NASA's mission that we clearly document is inspiring the next generation. When we talk about our mission to return humans to the moon for the first time in 50 years, we talk about the three pillars of that being science, national posture, and inspiration. And so having that embedded in our mission to inspire that next generation, whether it be kids or adults of all ages, to pursue STEM, pursue business fields, to be a part of our mission, it really makes our job really fun. Just this past weekend, we had a local event we call NASA in the Park, where we bring all of our goodies and technologies and hands-on experiments out to the community. We had over 14,000 people in the Huntsville community come out to interact with our teams. And so just seeing the enthusiasm and the excitement for the missions that we have really makes our job easier to do. It helps us stay focused, and it's important as we develop the next generation of folks that are going to continue this forward to continue to push for all of those different disciplines that we need to do our mission.
So maybe give us a little 101 on NASA. So you're at the Marshall Flight Center in Huntsville. Folks know about Houston and Canaveral. Maybe just talk about the kind of layers of the ecosystem of NASA, and maybe a little bit on like the significance of Marshall and Huntsville, which I didn't really appreciate until I made that trip down there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Marshall Space Flight Center is one of 10 NASA field centers. We're third largest in terms of workforce and second largest in terms of budget. Our portfolio has traditionally been launch vehicles, propulsion, large human spacecraft systems. We also do science and technology development, not only instrument development for scientific missions, but also fundamental science research and applied science. And then developing the lower technologies that we need to support all of the missions that we have. So we have one of the most diverse portfolios in the agency. We work with a number of our other, and all of the other NASA centers in pursuing the missions that we do. We're primarily a human spaceflight center, but again, we also do science and technology development. Marshall Space Flight Center sits on Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville. We have about 1,800 acres here at Redstone, 125 unique facilities and labs to help us do our mission, about 7,000 civil servants and contractors, and a $5 billion average annual budget to accomplish the missions that we're assigned. So we are and have been for next year will be our 65th birthday of celebrating Marshall's role in supporting spaceflight, all the way back to the amazing accomplishments of the Apollo missions, to groundbreaking scientific discoveries that we've enabled through Chandra and Hubble and James Webb, to the International Space Station, that we continue to do science and lead that activity. We host the Mission Control Center for all the science activities for ISS, and we've been doing that for over 23 years now, 24/7, 365. And so, and then now we're leading the efforts to return humans to the moon for the first time in 50 years with the development of the Space Launch System rocket and the human landing system with our partners, SpaceX and Blue Origin. So we have a very busy portfolio. There's a lot
Ah,
going on, but it's an exciting time to be a part of NASA.
so maybe take us a little bit through. I think people see some of these launches and Artemis and hear of these things, but break it down a little bit, right? Like, so the International Space Station is kind of coming to a kind of natural conclusion, and these new Artemis missions are kind of stepping forward with private sector engagement. Maybe talk a little bit about how and when all this is shaking out over the next 5, 10 years.
Right. So the International Space Station, we celebrated 25 years this year in orbit. It's a world-class laboratory where we've been able to do science, technology demonstrations, but also use it as a test bed for long-duration spaceflight. We've had a number of crew members who have spent extended durations on the space station, so we can understand the effects of the human body for staying in space for long periods of time, and that feeds forward to supporting how we would do a long duration mission on the moon or on a trip to Mars. As we look at that long term goal of putting humans on Mars, we're trying to develop the technologies to reduce that trip time so that the exposure the astronauts have is shorter and reduce those effects on the human body. The ISS has allowed us to test different mitigation strategies to those effects, whether it be medicines or exercises or different activities, but understanding how the human body reacts has been a big part of what we've done on ISS, as well as the systems that we need to protect and take care of the astronauts. For example, Marshall leads the development of the environmental control and life support systems that really produce water for the crew, removes carbon dioxide, and produce oxygen. And we've been able to test those systems on the International Space Station to improve their reliability and their performance. Just last year, we reached a new milestone for where we were able to reclaim and reuse 98% of the water on the International Space Station.
Oh,
That's critically important for a trip to Mars because if we can reuse and recycle water, that's less that we have to actually carry on the trip itself. So it has been a tremendous test bed to allow us to develop those technologies. And as we look to the future, as we move to go further out into the cosmos, or go back to the moon and on to Mars, we want to turn over that low Earth orbit science and research opportunities to commercial partners through the Commercial LEO Development Program. And so we're working with those partners now. And the intent is that once those partners are up and going and operating, and then we would transition our operations off of ISS into those commercial LEO platforms. It's
that's
another way
amazing.
NASA is enabling the commercial industry.
So let's tease out a few of these things. So to get to space, it's like 8.5 minutes, right? But to get to the moon is weeks, but to get to Mars is like 200 days or something like that. Walk us through just like the when you actually think about space and how big it
Right.
is. I think it's just got to be put into days and months. It's pretty shocking.
That's absolutely so. On some trajectories that we fly to ISS, it's usually anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, depending on the position and launch time and launch windows. So we can be at the space station within 24 hours. Uh, we can be at the moon within a couple of days.
Okay.
But yes, right now with current technologies going to Mars, it could be as long as an 8 month one-way trip, depending on literally the alignment of the planets.
Yeah.
For us to be able to test those technologies in low Earth orbit today, it reduces the risk. We move further out to the moon, we're able to test things, but we can still get back home within just a few days if for some reason we needed to. That trip to Mars is actually going to introduce more risk. And so
Sure.
not only what we do in low Earth orbit, but what we plan to do on the surface of the moon for longer duration stays is helping us learn to build up for that long trip to Mars.
I feel like the commercial engagement, I love to tease that a bit because it seems like there's a real eagerness on the part of NASA to really engage with the private sector about solving some of these challenges and kind of, getting ideas. So whether it's 3D printing or indoor and farming and kind of medical stuff, we're even seeing companies out here who want to do semiconductor manufacturing in space. I mean, talk a little bit about kind of soliciting and engaging with the private sector to kind of come up with some of these solutions, because to your point, you need to be able to recycle the water, and if you could print things on Mars and you don't have to bring them with you, that probably seems like the way to do these things, right?
You hit it. Now you nailed it there. So from the very beginning of NASA, we've had commercial and industry engagement in every mission we've done. I mean, all the way back to the original Mercury and Gemini days, we had industry partners that were working with us to develop the hardware and the systems we need. we've taken that even further with some of the acquisition models that we've done within NASA in how we procure or how we buy services. For example, today we buy crew flight services to the ISS from SpaceX and then Boeing. uh, we don't actually take ownership of that hardware. So it's a non-traditional model. We're doing the same thing for the human lander, for the lander that's going to return humans to the moon. We're buying a landing service. We're not actually buying the hardware for our crew to operate. So it's a different model, and that allows us to really to push for this commercial economic development. And that is part of our mission, we believe, is to enable that commercial market. Because what it allows NASA to do is to start handing over things that commercial can do so that we can free up the budgets we have to go do the harder things that commercial can't do yet. And so enabling that commercial space economy, we believe, is part of the answer. And it's going to take this whole of community, whether it be academic, international, industry, and government, to achieve something like putting humans on Mars. We have tremendous partnerships with our industry partners. We can work with them where they can come use our expertise to help with their missions, and then of course we use their expertise to help with our missions. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship. We have some very strong relationships and partnerships that we have, and it's going to take that to really achieve the goals that we have.
So when I think about NASA, you think about kind of the inspiration it creates, the significance of the moon landing, what it meant to the United States as a superpower. You think about the technology that comes out of it. One statistic that I was absolutely blown away by, because of how much it costs to go to space and to do all this stuff, is that the total budget for NASA since inception is less than 1 year's budget of the Department of Defense. Is that pretty accurate?
You're quoting good numbers there. You're probably right on. I'll say it in terms of percentage because that's what I can that I speak to. During the Apollo era, we had about 4% of the total national budget that the U.S. had. Now we have less than half of 1% of the total national budget. So it's and of course we deal with inflationary issues and the cost of goods and things that makes it even more amazing the things that we accomplish with the budgets that we have. And so we have enjoyed a great bipartisan support in Congress and from our stakeholders and from the administration. The excitement and the missions that we're able to accomplish, not only for that inspiration that we talked about for the scientific discovery, but the national posture of being a leader in space exploration. And you see that most exhibited now with the Artemis Accords, where we are inviting international partners, international countries, and other countries and partners to join with us in this mission to put humans on the moon and eventually on the Mars. And so we have well over 35, 38 countries now that have signed the Artemis Accords to be a part of this international campaign and mission to return to the moon for a sustained presence. And that's one of the big differences this time is during Apollo, we went to the equatorial regions. We stayed for a few days and we came home. Now we want to go to the South Pole and we want to spend 30 to 60 days at a time studying and doing science there. So it's a tremendous international collaboration. It really builds on what we did with the International Space Station program.
So unlike maybe some other federal agencies, there's a very tangible return on the investment that taxpayer dollars have had with NASA. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, tens of thousands of actual innovations we use day to day as a result of direct investment into space and exploration, right?
Absolutely. And we talk about it in terms of spinoffs and technology spinoffs. And every year we put out a technology report that talks how we're able to share the technologies we develop with others that they can infuse in different ways. Just in Alabama, NASA's economic impact is estimated to be about $10 billion and about 40,000 jobs. And so you can see that what we do just here in Alabama from Marshall and the NASA activities here has a tremendous benefit to our communities and our state, contributing to and pouring into these missions to achieve these national goals. And NASA, I believe, has a brand power that is unlike any other in the federal government. For really a very small portion of the budget, we can have a major impact, not only on what we do as a nation, but also what we do with our next generation and the partnerships that we have around the world.
Hmm. So right now, I work in real estate, so we're spending a lot of time helping companies with site selection around advanced manufacturing. So a lot of what we've been traveling the country on is related to companies tapping Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure bill, and they all need kind of sites for job creation. It's a really exciting moment on this resurgence in manufacturing, which in the United States we really haven't had a lot of that manufacturing over the last few decades. How do you think about bills like that and that kind of investment and how it could be helpful to NASA from a kind of innovation and manufacturing perspective, right? So kind of two-part question, that kind of existing landscape. And do we need like an Inflation Reduction Act or a NASA bill that's equal in magnitude? Because that's $1 trillion of resources, loans and grants to kind of spark innovation and manufacturing. I almost feel like a similar investment could be made as we make a true commitment to get into Mars, because the delta of what's going to be needed to get there is probably still pretty massive, right?
So we have, we definitely are concerned about the supply chain, and so we pay attention to the industrial base, and manufacturing is a key area that Marshall is a leader in the agency in developing the technologies that we need, not only for space, so the activities and the things that we have to build to get to space, added to manufacturing, for example, is one of those areas, but we're also working on in-space manufacturing and surface manufacturing. How do we take the things that are in surface or on the surface of the moon, for example, in 3D print habitats or 3D print landing pads? We're working on a project right now with an industry partner where we're testing lunar regolith simulate in a construction device to actually 3D print what we would use as a landing pad for our landers. And so it's a great application of that manufacturing industrial base here on Earth. That industry partner is actually 3D printing homes in Texas, and we're
Oh, well,
taking that technology and applying it to how we would 3D print on the surface of the moon with lunar regolith. So I think it's a great example of how we're taking that industrial base and using it to help us accomplish our mission. And we need that industrial base here to support the supply chain, the hardware, the components that we need. We have components for our rocket that come from all 50 states. And so it takes a big industrial base to support these space missions that we have. And we're very lucky that we have the base that we do. And these the more missions that we can achieve as an agency that we pursue, it really just helps enable that economy.
yeah. I mean, we've learned about companies like out of the UK called Space Forge, which are looking to do semiconductor manufacturing in space, and Gravitics looking to build like larger kind of 8-10 meter size capsules. I mean, it's amazing stuff. I mean, the innovation happening out there. So you're kind of in a position to help kind of support some of the private sector companies to the point of the private sector, then kind of capital markets coming in and helping them grow even further. So like NASA could be a real kind of multiplier effect for capacity, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's written into our original legislation, the Space Act of 1958, that we can actually do work for industry. We can do work for commercial partners. So here at Marshall, we have over 400 partnership agreements where we are actually doing work for an industry partner, where they're either using our expertise or using our facilities to help them advance their mission. And it's all aligned to things that we're doing in the aerospace industry. And we make technologies available through our technology transfer office that others can take our technology and use it in different ways. And so those are some of the ways that we're really trying to help spur this commercial economy in space, but also in manufacturing and other areas.
That's amazing. I mean, do you find yourself having to get on the road and kind of, educate folks about what's available to the private sector, what you need from the private sector? How much of your time is kind of running the flight center versus out there kind of being a leader and an advocate for NASA in general?
It's both, and we have a great team. I have a great team here at the center that helps us do that. We actually have a whole partnerships office that is focused on creating those opportunities, both for us to support industry, but also for industry to come support us and us partner together on developing the technology we need. We've identified 187 fundamental shortfalls of technologies that we need to go develop or advance to support a Mars mission. And so we know what those things are, and we can work with industry and academic partners, international partners to find the innovation and the ideas and the technologies we need to close those shortfalls so we can accomplish that mission. And so we have a great team here that helps make those connections and create those opportunities. And I'm just lucky to get to be here to work with them and work with this entire community that is doing some amazing things with space exploration.
Oh, that's amazing. Talk a little bit about international partnerships. I mean, you can kind of see it in the news a little bit. Other countries are trying to get more involved in space. How do you all kind of coordinate? How do you support? How do you help? I mean, even the International Space Station and Artemis, I think it's a testament to kind of foreign policy and kind of broader relationships around the world, right?
Absolutely. NASA clearly has not only a brand power recognition here in the States, but also really worldwide, and our ability to use the pursuit of space exploration, advancement of humanity's role, and moving further out in the cosmos is a great way to bridge partnerships with international partners. You mentioned International Space Station. Every day, our controllers here in the Science Control Center are talking to controllers in Japan, in Europe, in Russia, or payload investigators around the world that connect to our science center to do the science that they're working on the International Space Station. And so it has been a true beacon of international partnership. And now we're taking that further with the Artemis missions. Marshall is one of leading the development of the habitation system concepts that we will use both on the surface of the moon and in space in transit to Mars. And we are leading today the concept development for what will likely be the first habitable volume on the surface of the moon with our international partners, the Italian Space Agency. And so we are in the middle of the concept development right now with the Italians to develop that habitat, and it will be a place where the crew will live and work for those long duration stays on the moon. So that's just one example of how we're really engaging our partners in an area where Marshall's leading for the agency.
Is there a lot of cross-government cooperation and partnership in a larger way today than maybe previously? Whether it's like the Department of Transportation or Commerce or DoD, et cetera. I mean, obviously government communicates and coordinates with each other, but I'm just wondering if this commitment to kind of focus on going further and deeper into space has kind of created more kind of connectivity, because you'll see kind of the vice president is very actively involved in the White House Space Council, right? It seems like there's a little bit broader coordination, Space Force now, et cetera.
Absolutely. We see tremendous partnerships, especially with our DoD partners and other government agencies. A lot of focus around space situation awareness and debris. We have a lot of debris in orbit. Just this week, we had, a time where the crew, there was a concern about a conjunction with the ISS, and so we had to, have the crew get in their safe places to make sure that in case there were any impact to the ISS, that they would be safe. Those are whole of government issues that we have to go address. As an example, debris in space that we do here at Marshall. We sit on Redstone Arsenal. There's over 65 federal organizations that are here on Redstone Arsenal that we get a chance to partner with for common use technology development that is going to help both of our missions as we go forward, as we use technologies in different ways, but they're similar technology development. We partner with the commerce in this whole space economy and the economics around this commercial space. When our commercial crew providers fly our astronauts to the space station, they have to get approval from the FAA, because the FAA actually does the licensing for commercial space launches. And so we have a lot of different intergovernmental partnerships and relationships that we manage, and we have a great team at NASA that helps us navigate those.
So just to close it out, and we're so grateful for you spending some time with us. When we started this series, it was really kind of focused on that part of the Venn diagram where the public sector, private sector, and kind of nonprofits and education kind of come together, and issues around space require all three of those buckets. Is there a kind of call to action that you have, whether it's to other leaders in government for more funding, more capacity, from the private sector for thinking more creatively about what they could be doing to help NASA and deeper space exploration, and then lastly for education around talent, and are we teaching young people what they need to know around STEM and engineering to actually be equipped with the skills to kind of be a partner to NASA?
So we have some tremendous goals, big goals as a nation in space exploration, and being able to inspire that next generation and getting students interested not only in science and engineering and math, but the business professionals, the communication professionals, the attorneys, the contracts professionals. We need all of those folks to be a part of our mission. And I think it's rooted in the human uh, core in our culture to explore, to move further, to learn, to expand our knowledge. And that's really what NASA is doing today and what we're leading is expanding our humanity's knowledge of what's going on in the universe, whether it's be through our robotic science missions and instruments and things like James Webb and Hubble to what we're trying to do and return humans to the moon and study the composition of the moon and the fact that we believe there's water ice there. We have rovers on the surface of Mars right now taking samples that we'll eventually recover and understand what has happened in our universe and how Mars is formed to be the closest thing to what we have on Earth in terms of potential for habitable volume in the past. And so we have some amazing missions at NASA, and I think the more we can tell that story, the more people like you help us tell that story, it's going to generate that excitement and the return that we provide for our country and for the world. I think is just beyond measure. We like to say that every dollar spent on space is actually spent here on Earth, and I
Oh, I
think
love
that
that.
is truly a part of how we can not only benefit our expansion of humanity's knowledge, but also make life better here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing last year, I think it was John Deere actually kind of got engaged with Earth observation around like crop growth and climate change. So things that we can see from space will clearly impact our success and life here on Earth. So last question. I mean, well, what's the focus and commitment to coffee in space? I mean, I believe it was our Italian colleague on the space station who actually made espresso on the space station on the ISS, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, these astronauts are going to need coffee, Joseph. I mean, what's how much of a priority has it been?
Yeah, so it was a priority early on in the space station for us to be able to fly. We actually here at Marshall we helped develop what we call a potable water dispenser that had a hot water dispenser so that they could mix hot water with instant coffee and have the coffee on board. So
Perfect.
it's always great to be able to give our astronauts a little taste of home while they're up there doing all the great science they're doing.
Well, look, we're very grateful to you, to your team, and all the work that's being done at Marshall and NASA more broadly. So thanks for joining us on Coffee with Ken. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We wish you a wonderful July 4th week and weekend. And if you want to catch up on past episodes or tune in on future ones, we're at coffeewithken.com. Thanks so much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.